Good evening. Hello everyone, my name is Perry, also known as Books Aren't Boring, and I am aware that there hasn't been any updates to my channel in a while. That may be my fault, that is in fact my fault, but you know what, we're gonna make up for it because this summer, obviously, we're out of school, and also a bit of fun, graduation, sparkle effects, whatever. Now that I am no longer of the school system, I have, I guess, another one of my videos of a few things that I've learned. And I'm not sure exactly if this video is going to resonate with anyone other than other people who have already graduated, but maybe it will help a little bit to hear some of the stuff that I've learned. Because I had my anniversary video where I reminisced about, the past books that I had read, or just in general, like types of things that I've learned from being in school. And now that I've graduated and I finished my final project for school, which involved this channel, you can finally see what all of this has been for. So first of all, I'd like to say one thing, which is thank you for supporting my channel as always, and I will be posting a video soon that I used as my final video for my final project. So the number one thing that I've learned from being in school is that none of this is as important as you may think it is. And hear me out, because the whole point of my channel was to be like, hey, reading books is important. Make sure to do your literature. And I'm not saying not to do that, but I mean, in the context of school, in your classrooms, in your curriculum, reading these books is not as important as you may think it is. I need that to sink in, and I need you to also listen to the following qualifiers. It's not as important in terms of you do not have to remember every single quote. You do not have to remember every single little detail. You don't have to worry about specific things that may go in your essays later in the future. You do need to understand the book and its concepts. But what I mean is, it's not that important to fret over every little thing that happens. And I feel like that's what happens a lot of times with people in school, is that if they do the reading, then they get very caught up in what they need to remember, what they need to put in their essays, because obviously essays are what make your grade. Or if you're doing quizzes, you need to remember certain details, but those certain details aren't always actually important. So you do need to decide to compartmentalize what is actually important for the long run versus what is important for this class right now, or else you're just gonna be constantly burnt out from trying to remember every single little detail, because it truly is not as important as you may think it is. Number 2, the best thing you will get out of these readings that you do for school, other than the basic thematic ideas that are important, is basically just friendship. And it really depends on your group of friends, but in my case, it becomes a little bit easier to connect to each other if you have those combined school experiences. And I mean this in the case of, like, if you do decide to read the book, then you suffered through one part, or you got to do the same assignment together and you all had like different perspectives on the quotes that you were supposed to take out, or like one of you didn't take out the proper quotes and it was like a whole thing. What I'm saying is that if you are with a group of friends, I would encourage you to be like, hey, maybe we should look at this a little bit. Not too pushy, but also just enough that if you were to look at that class, you were to look back at that class, then you could be like, oh, that was a fun time, not the reading of it, but like the stuff that we did because we read it. Because you'd be surprised at how many times when you're with people from school that something that you did in class together comes up. It's not a staple of anything from high school or beyond. It's just something that is like, hey, it's a connecting factor, and you never want to just throw those away, Number 3 thing that I learned from being in the school system for this long is that you'd be surprised on what will interest you. And I know that is also the purpose of this channel, but what I'm saying is that it's one of the major things that I took away from this, and that you can't discredit any of the books that you've gone to read just because you think you might not like it. And even if you read the SparkNotes summary and you're like, oh, I don't think I like this, you will never actually know. You'll never know if you find the writing style interesting. You'll never find out if there was something very specific that was funny or interesting in the book that you might have liked if you never try to read it. I know that not everyone has the time, and you may have to pick and choose what you do, but I am saying that maybe you shouldn't discredit it, of course. Because a lot of people, I find, look at the cover of the book and they're like, well, this is boring, and then they throw it away, and they'll never know if they like it until maybe years down the line, and then they're like, why didn't I read this when it got first assigned to me? And I know that's the mentality of a high schooler. You're going to be like, I don't want to do this because I don't find it interesting at first glance, and that's something a lot of people do. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to think that way, but maybe you could think about it in a little bit of a different way, or like have that thought first and then go on to have like a second thought that's like, actually no, maybe I should read this. And the fourth thing that I've learned isn't necessarily a book related hack, but it's related to the reading of books in school settings, which is always do as much as possible on your essays. And this sounds a little bit like cheating, but it is not cheating. It is very important, or maybe not very important, but I found that it does help. If you set your median length, average length of your essays that you're writing about these books to being like very long compared to what your average is, maybe you're supposed to write 5-paragraph essays, maybe 4-paragraph essays. You want to try to make them as long as possible, but not so long that the teacher gets bored. Just long enough that you can be like, okay, within there is enough substantial information to get me the grade. Because the problem is that if you make it too short, then you have to fit all that important information is. And if you miss something, there's no chance for you to have touched upon it later or at another point just because of how much you wrote. But instead, you probably won't get like the full points because you made it so short. And also don't make it too long either, because teachers don't want to read that and they'll probably get annoyed and not do it. And I say this having been like one of the people who wrote the longest essays for one of our assignments. The length of your essay doesn't determine your grade, but it does kind of determine it if you do not write enough. You know, you got to write enough so that the teacher knows that you had engagement. And if you didn't have engagement, then you could at least pretend that you had engagement by making it long enough to make it seem like you understood the book. Fifth thing I've learned is that making YouTube videos is kind of hard. There's a lot of things, not necessarily even the editing or like videotaping, because you know, you're sitting in front of a screen. By the way, I forgot to put up my typical screen, so this is like a throwback to when I didn't have one. It was very boring. But yes, it is difficult to make YouTube videos kind of, because there is not a lot to talk about in terms of BookTube. And I don't even mean BookTube, because BookTube is comprised of a lot of different genres, and I'm specifically focusing on school. But I found that with school, having been there, and not necessarily having a lot of books that I was reading because I was working on this final project, it was more difficult to figure out what I should do videos on. And even sitting next to me right now, I have multiple books because I put it as a display for my final project. But yeah, this kind of leads into me once again begging for video ideas from watchers who potentially want to see me doing more interesting things. So I'd like if you could give ideas of what those more interesting things might be, so that I can continue to provide content that isn't just me kind of just going off about things for a couple minutes. But yeah, so this is a bit of a shorter video. Obviously, timer at the top of my video recorder says 14 minutes, but of course that's going to be shortened. Normally I get it to about 20, but thank you. This was just a little bit of me half ranting, half talking about my experience of graduation. I might make a real graduation video at some point, but who knows, because my allergies are having a day. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope that you enjoyed this video in some capacity, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.